Hopefully I can share some crazy ideas with you here today based upon my last 3 or 4 years neck deep in the world of autonomous vehicles. Crazy ideas, things that are actually happening, and hopefully some food for thought. Actually, I want to follow on from the last session that was on yesterday afternoon and touch on a point. Basically, the future of transportation is incredibly data heavy. It's starting to define a lot of what we do. As you're aware, there's a lot more data being collected from vehicles, and that's going to be sort of the core of a lot of the things I described today. But one thing I wanted to touch on from a government perspective, we've been exploring what role government plays in the collection and dissemination of data around vehicles. And a lot of governments sort of still think that it's going to be hosted there, and then you've got the OEMs and other parties that are sort of cloud players that think that they're going to own it for their own sort of shareholder reasons. But I think there's a middle ground that we'll end up with, and I just want to bounce this off you, and a lot of companies actually come to this realization that it'll end up being an independent third party. No one wants government to hold it because you get the big brother scenario and actually it's completely flipped in Europe. In Europe, they're happier with government holding it rather than private entities. But recently this concept of a civic data trust is sort of coming to the forefront. So from a privacy and security aspect, especially for things that are applied in our city landscape, I think that's what you'll see coming to the forefront and being discussed a lot more. So with that in mind, I wanted to take you through sort of a crash scenario, if I don't run out of time, to explore some key points which I hope are relevant and as I said, good food for thought for the crash repair industry. The first point is the incident itself. The crash happens. What kind of information is being gathered there? And historically, we've called these crashes accidents. Apparently, people didn't like that because often it was a fallible human making a bad decision that resulted in the incident itself. But in the future, I think we're talking more about a failure event because you're taking the human out of that scenario. And I guess I'm talking about the mixed environment, which is going to be around for a while, where you're going to have an increasing number of autonomous vehicles and highly automated vehicles. I guess it's going to be a grey area for quite a while. But humans still on the road, still driving vehicles for a very long time. So yeah, we're talking more about component failure or a failure in the decision-making of the artificial intelligence or other algorithms in the vehicle. And I'll come back to this in a few minutes' time as well, but that's sort of a key point, and it ends up becoming very, very important, I think, to the crash repair industry as well. So at the point of impact today, there's certain types of data being collected. You used to get sort of braking scenarios, airbag deployments. If you've got any telematics in the vehicle, if you're part of a fleet, some more additional information, GPS location, and potentially some G-force type technologies. Going forward, you have, not even going forward, Teslas today are fully outfitted with video. They're largely a video-based solution when you're talking about their technologies. The other major sensor that comes into play is the LiDAR, which creates a 3D map of the world around the vehicle when these incidents happen. The interesting thing about these is historically everything has been internal to the vehicle, but all of a sudden we're getting a picture of what's happening around the vehicle. I believe actually here in Vegas as well, there's a company called Nexar that's deployed an app that turns your phone into a dash cam. And not only is it collecting dash cam footage, it's collecting sort of all the heading information, the collision information, the G-forces that happen behind it, a huge wealth of information, and they're reporting that back to insurance companies. And it's kind of like a proof of exactly what happened. So if people are doing that today with an app on a cell phone, the future's looking really interesting. So, with all this data, it enables a whole range of new, I guess, tools. And the one I'm going to try and maybe bounce off you is the idea that the parts for a collision repair arrive at your shop before the vehicle's even there. And this is, the logic behind this is that, you've got a lot of, there was crash slides just up before of, the research that the OEMs do upon manufacturing. They understand what happens to this vehicle and what happens in certain types of scenarios. So with all this data being collected over time, not only the OEM data, but historic accidents, if I've got things like, angle of incidents that you've got, the G-forces behind it, I'm willing to bet you can actually start getting a very clear idea of estimating the cost of the damage or the components that are damaged in most crashes, or standard types of crashes that people have. So the idea that within half an hour of an incident actually happening, you have an understanding of what parts are going to be needed to repair that. It's not completely crazy that those parts are ordered or shipped, long before the vehicle even arrives at your shop. The information is out there today, but like within government, a lot of it's siloed. People don't really know what to do with it yet. So I like to believe that something like that is totally doable. The depth of data may not be quite there yet, but it's an interesting direction to start heading in. So again, talking about the video footage in particular, moving on to sort of the first responder scenario where, who's the person that turns up on scene? Right now in Las Vegas, if you not even have a crash, but if you stop on the I-15 highway out here or one of the major arterial roads and break down for whatever reason, the Nevada Highway Patrol and the Highway Service Patrol, who are the ones who will come and change your tire if you got a flat, they'll actually have a little video clip of your vehicle and where you are and what situation you're in before they even get on scene. So that's kind of useful for them. They know what they're getting into. They know exactly where you are and where to stop and pull over. But think about it from a paramedic's perspective. If we can start getting live video streams, if the vehicle's still functional enough, or you can get even just the last few minutes of what that vehicle was doing and what kind of incident it ended up in, that, just saves lives. You end up with a paramedic with their heads up as to what they're getting into, what exactly the scenario looks like. So these are the type of things that we're looking at here in Nevada. And sort of looking forward to deploying as well. The reason government's interested in this type of information is from a traffic management perspective after those crashes actually happen. Jumping through, I don't want to touch on insurance too much. I guess you get beaten over the head by it. But I think the key point there is, going back to this failure event, is that you're no longer insuring a driver looking forward with these autonomous vehicles. It's product insurance. It's oversimplifying. It's like your toaster breaking down and you want to take it back for a warranty. Obviously, the ramifications are far more significant in the failure of a product autonomous vehicle. But I think that's going to change the way insurance works. Another key point as well is, maybe this is a personal view, I don't think we're going to personally own autonomous vehicles. I just don't see it happening. The two forces that are sort of driving that opinion are the rate of technology and how fast they're coming. Right now, there are 70 autonomous BMW 5 Series operating on the streets of Las Vegas. I don't know if anyone's used the Lyft app and been lucky enough to get a ride in one, but there's 30 operating under the Lyft platform, and it'll take you to various strip properties in an autonomous vehicle. So with that in mind, in conjunction with the business models that are changing around mobility as a service, where you're paying a monthly fee to ride on whatever means of transport you need to do what you do on a daily basis. I think those two things developing in parallel will mean by the time we have significant penetration of autonomous or highly automated vehicles, you don't need one yourself. It's just not going to be cost effective anymore. And how that impacts insurance, I guess, remains to be seen. If all these vehicles are actually fleet owned and operated, it's an interesting dynamic. And potentially relevant to you guys. It's like, well, does that mean you start aligning yourself more with fleet operators and what role do you play on a regional basis in supporting these potentially nationwide fleets of vehicles? And I guess actually this is an interesting one, is this idea of driver restoration. Again, comes back to the fact you've got no driver and you've got this vehicle. Today you're repairing a vehicle and you hope the driver's doing well. And you probably, I know you're experiencing this with the sort of more advanced ADAS technologies now as well. They become more difficult to repair. You're probably not being compensated adequately for those repairs. But as you move forward and that vehicle becomes completely independent, your liability and the fact you're repairing literally the eyes and ears of the driver of the vehicle, your role becomes incredibly important and far more sensitive. And it's true when I say ears. For example, the Waymo autonomous vehicles operating down in Phoenix are listening. They're listening out for things like emergency vehicles. Again, the video and the LiDAR sensors are the eyes of the vehicle. So if you're replacing a panel and it's incorrectly aligned, it's not validated, you're potentially threatening the next riders of that vehicle. So your role becomes incredibly important. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity going forward. I think that's kind of all I have to say, but it's an exciting, fast-moving area, and SCRS is definitely going to help you be successful going forward, but my sort of takeaway is look more broadly as to what's happening in transportation, because it's likely to be moving far faster than you're actually expecting or you're seeing in your shops today. Thanks.